Hi, this is Mashnu, and this position was reached in a game between Anatoly Karpov and Boris Spassky. They played this game in the candidate matches in 1974, and here it's white to move, and I find this fragment actually a very good example of how Anatoly Karpov manages to find the ideal squares for his pieces. Perhaps you would like to have a look at the position yourself and think about what you would do here, because I'm going to continue the explanation right now. What white did here is, first of all, he kicked away the knight from b4 by playing the move c3, and the knight went to a6. Not much choice there. The next move is very interesting. If we look at the position, we see that we have here a knight on b1 that is actually very inactive, and it looks as if it doesn't have much future. Going to a3 doesn't lead to any important place. It's not really a very good way to activate this knight, and I think Karpov realized it very well that the weakness of black is at this point this pawn on e5, and it would be very nice to have this knight on f3 attacking the pawn on e5, and also from there attacking the bishop on h4. So the plan that he made was to bring the knight to d2, then to f3. And he did this in a way that is, well, at first sight it looks a bit strange. He moved his rook from d2 to e2. Now this goes completely against all these ideas that we learned, that we should keep the rooks on the open files. And now a top grandmaster like Karpov places his rook on e2, one of the files that is closed right now. So why is he doing this? Well, of course, to make this d2 square available for the knight, and he wants to avoid the trade of rooks. Why is that? I mean, he could of course also have traded a pair of rooks and then bring the knight to d2, but Karpov wants to keep both rooks on the board because his rooks can be used for an attack against f7. This nice half open file can be used for that. And he's also thinking that he has the option later perhaps to bring both rooks back to the d file and have two rooks on the d file. So there is absolutely no necessity in trading the rooks. So he played a rook to e2, and black played rook to f8, defending the weak point f7. Now Karpov continued with his plan, knight to d2. And here Spassky did something that we see sometimes Karpov also do, and that is to move a piece before it's attacked. So preventing that your opponent wins a tempo by making a move and attacking your piece. So he moved his bishop from h4 to d8. Perhaps bishop to e7 would have been better, but the idea of bishop to d8 is that the 7th rank is still empty, so the queen defends the weak point f7. Now the knight goes from d2 to f3 as planned, not winning a tempo on the bishop anymore, but attacking the pawn on e5. Now this pawn must be defended, so Spassky moved here the move f7, f6, pawn to f6. And here, now that Karpov has achieved the first part of his plan, bringing his knight to f3, he continues with, let's say, the second part, and that is using the open file. He goes back with his rook to d2. Rook to d2. So now the pieces are on ideal squares. This is a very good square for the knight, and the rook is placed on the open file. With the move f6 of black, the square e6 has become weak. So already we can start seeing ideas like queen to e6 and rook to d7. Now perhaps you think, what about this now defended pawn on e5? Is this knight so well placed because it cannot take on e5? Well, you will see in a few moves that some threats appear that involve a sacrifice on e5. Let's continue with the game. Spassky moved now his bishop from d8 to e7, and Karpov continued his idea of making use of this weakened square on e6 by playing queen to e6. So it's clearly threatening rook to d7, attacking the queen and attacking the bishop. And Spassky prevented this idea by playing his rook from a8 to d8. Now it's the time to execute. Karpov took the rook on d8, rook takes d8, and this places black in a difficult position. He has a dilemma how to retake. He chose to retake with the bishop, but let's have a short look what would happen if he would take, let's say, the more natural move, rook takes d8. In that case, if rook takes d8 here, now comes the idea of the sacrifice on e5. Knight takes e5. There we are. And you can see that retaking this knight leads to a very strong attack for white. If f takes e5, rook to f7 check, and this will be checkmate in a few moves. King h8, queen takes g6, and the next move is queen to h7 checkmate. If the knight is not taken, so here after knight takes e5, if black doesn't take, then still we have this threat of queen to f7. So black would have to play something like rook to f8, and then, well, we have different choices. Knight to d7 is a strong move. Also, perhaps taking on c6, knight takes c6 is a strong move. And even perhaps there are tactical ideas with knight takes g6, because we have all our pieces directed towards the black king. So perhaps we can sacrifice a piece and then go, let's see, rook to f3 or rook to f5 perhaps. Rook to f5 threatening rook to g5 check. Looks wild, doesn't it? Let's have a look. What happens if now black would, let's say, go king to g7, then rook takes h5, and if he wants to keep defending this pawn, then perhaps rook to h8, but in that case then we have our threat of rook to g5 check, and wherever the king goes it will be checkmated soon. King to h7, queen to f7 check, and the next move is rook takes h5 checkmate. So you see, in this type of positions we have actually all our pieces involved in the attack against the king. And if we look at the black pieces, these two are kept out of the defense. Now let's return to the game, because as I told you, after taking on d8, black retook with the bishop, so keeping this f6 pawn defended. Now knight takes e5 doesn't work, of course, because f7 is very well defended. So what Karpov did is, again, he used the other entrance for his attack. Rook to d1. Again with the threat of rook to d7. To prevent this entrance of the rook, Boris Spassky played knight to b8. The knight defends the square d7, but now white continues attacking with bishop to c5, attacking the rook on f8. Now this rook must stay defending the bishop on d8, so it cannot go to f7. Rook to h8 was played, and now the final move is a very beautiful one. Perhaps you would like to pause the video and see if you can find it. It's rook takes d8. In this position, Spassky resigned, because if he retakes this rook, rook takes d8, then follows a beautiful move, bishop to e7. Bishop to e7, and now f6 is terribly weak. It's actually impossible to save this now. A move like knight to d7 would simply follow bishop takes rook. So if the only way would be to move the rook to f8, and then also the rook is taken with check, and then what is left over is not an equal position because of these weak pawns on f6 and g6. So queen takes f6 follows here, and then after the king moves, then we can either take on e5 or take on g6, or give a check on h8 perhaps. You see, perhaps that's the most simple way to win. Give a check here, and after the king moves, then give another check, or take here with check. Yeah, this is collapsing completely. The black king is very vulnerable. So the most important moments I find in this example are, well, first of all, let's start from the beginning. This move rook to e2. The idea to bring the knight to a better square. And then we see, after this is done, then white shifts again to the, let's say, traditional concept of occupying the open file with a rook. And then after this, he uses the weak square e6 to enter and have a direct threat of rook to d7. And here there is a trade, and no matter how black retakes, it would lead to a better position for white. Rook to d1 is a wonderful move, again with the same threat, rook to d7, and most important in this game is the activity of the pieces working together, and the black piece is actually out of play. Knight to b8, bishop c5. Everything is directed towards this part of the board. Rook h8, now rook takes d8, the last move of the game. Alright, I hope that you found it an interesting example. There are, of course, hundreds of examples of games played by Anatoly Karpov, where he shows these beautiful maneuvers that, well, for many players were kind of mysterious, because he was really a very talented player in that sense, that he could maneuver slowly in some games to place his pieces on better square, or to force the opponent pieces to ugly squares. Alright, I'll just leave it up to here, and I wish you a good day and lots of fun playing chess.